Hi guys, my name's Jonah Gokserwig, and this is my cognitive science podcast for PIDP 3100. So we're going to be talking about a concept called the generation effect. The article that I've chosen for this podcast is one by Irina Streich and Jürgen Meyer. It is called Effects and Prerequisites of Self-Generation in Inquiry-Based Learning. The article itself is looking at the role of the generation effect, or self-generation as they define it, in an inquiry-based learning environment. The generation effect is a phenomenon where information is more easily encoded into the learner's memory when they come up with that information or they generate that information, in contrast to simply reading said information or listening to someone talk about said information. So for the experiment that they conducted, they got together 98 6th to 7th graders in Germany, categorized into three groups. They took one group called the self-generation group, one group was called the self-generation with feedback group, and one group was called the rereading group. All the students went through a learning session where they received information about the migratory patterns of water fleas, information they wouldn't expect 6th and 7th graders to know about previously. They went through the inquiry task where students in the self-generation groups had to come up with hypotheses about recently learned information. They collected and interpreted the data individually and in groups. Members of the rereading group simply read out already written out hypotheses and interpretations, and that was it for that task. The self-generation with feedback group received immediate feedback from the same text that was presented to the rereading group. The regular self-generation group received no feedback whatsoever. The groups were then tested with a questionnaire 10 minutes after the inquiry task and then 1 week after to measure for long-term retention. In accordance with the whole idea of the generation effect, Streich and Meyer expected the students in the self-generation group to outperform those in the rereading group. They actually found poorer performance from those in the self-generation with no feedback group, and no real significant difference between the self-generation with feedback and the rereading group. The main takeaway point here is that feedback is vitally important when using the generation effect. Now, I work as a culinary instructor for children, and for example, in my classes, I will often start off class by going over safety instructions, how to go about in a kitchen in a safe manner. And I use the generation effect. I ask students, what do you think would be a safe rule? But if a student comes up with a rule, for example, it's okay to run around in a kitchen so long as you're not carrying a knife in your hand, and I give no feedback to that, then they're going to start going around thinking that it's okay to run around in the kitchen when it's potentially dangerous. Feedback is vital. However, if I don't use the generation effect, I take away the opportunity for students to create their own understanding. If I just tell students to put baking powder in their cookie batter because it will help it rise, that's a very different approach than asking them, what do you think this baking powder is going to do to our cookies? When I ask that question and I get them to create their own knowledge, they're actively trying to think about how this might work, and then I provide feedback at the end to make sure that they're going home with correct information. I found the information in this article to be quite reliable. It comes from an international peer-reviewed academic journal. Both authors are academic researchers. The date is fairly current. It's 2020. That's 4 years ago. That's not too bad. And it's got a good 56 sources, all from other academic articles from other peer-reviewed journals. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast.